Knowledge is its very nature, and knowledge is its potential power and supremacy. And with that, it is capable of dissolving all the instruments, so to say, their functions, and yet tell you, I slept. The I slept, and the knowledge of having slept comes to the I all by itself. So it is very clear that there is something in the way of a kutastha, a changeless factor remaining in us. The senses are changeful. The mind is definitely changeful. The intelligence also is subject to fluctuation. The ego also sometimes is not. At least in sleep it is not. In unconsciousness perhaps it is not. Even then, surviving that unconsciousness and sleep, the I is able to assert itself without anybody's help. That clearly shows how supreme, how wholesome, how sovereign and how independent the self denoted by the term I is in us. Now this is what Pipalayana points out. So God is not merely a religious concept. It's actually a matter of experience, a cognition. Now if you have to get God in the way of a cognition or an upalabdhi, you have to sink within your body, go to the mind, go to the intelligence, go to the ego, transcend all of them, understand what happens in sleep, how you get the knowledge of sleep, then the whole mystery is revealed. Andeshu peshishu tarushva vinishchiteshu prano hi jivam upadhavati tatra tatra sanne yadindriya gane ahamicha prasupte kudastha ashayamrde tadanusmridirnaha. Is there anyone in this world who does not sleep? And is there anyone who, having slept, will not be able to refer to it as I did sleep comfortably? Now this one factor is sufficient for us to let us know how the Supreme Self is within our body, and whenever we refer to I, we are actually denoting the Supreme Self. And as Sudha put it right in the beginning of Sreemad Bhagavatam, Vadandi tat tattva vidaha tattvam yajnanamadvayam brahmedi paramatmedi Bhagavan iti shabdyate. What we call Bhagavan, what we call Brahman, is actually Advaya Jnanam, and that is the Paramatma. What is Advaya Jnana? Even in all the object perceptions, actual perceptions take place in the perceiving consciousness. And in the consciousness alone produces impressions of the objects. So apart from, in terms of content, consciousness itself, is there anything in the perception of the world? Perception, mind you, belongs to the perceiver. The perceiver is consciousness. The consciousness itself, with the help of the senses seemingly, it forms the impressions of the objects. You go to dream, without the external senses also, the consciousness produces a number of object impressions in dream. So the power of the consciousness is supreme. It is independent, it is sovereign, it is capable of doing everything. Can you focus in this fact and truth? Ask Srimad Bhagavatam, ask Vedavyasa Maharshi, points out Pipalayana, the yogi, to Nimi Chakravarti. Here now, I, Swami Bhoomananda Tirtha, is actually exhorting every one of you, my viewers, to go into your own inner personality and unearth this wonderful I you are referring to. With the help of no second factor, it gives you the knowledge of sleep, understands its independence, supremacy and wholesomeness. God, the Self, or even the Supreme Reality called Brahman, this is actually an upalabdhi, a matter of experience. When it becomes an experience, there is no doubt, there is no question. Do I have to prove to you that you exist? Everybody knows I am, I am, I am. That amness of the I is very evident. Nobody wants any proof. But can you show me what is this I and what is this amness? It cannot be shown, it cannot be extracted. Here is a piece of scale in my hand. I can show it to you. In this manner, I cannot show what is this I, what is God, or what is Brahman. It is something to be accomplished in the form of a direct personal experience. That is why it is called Upalabdhi Matram. Now, this is how you have to proceed. Now, after having given a philosophical dissertation of the whole subject of devotion, in order to help Nimi Chakravarti to actualize and realize the truth of God in his own very being, he goes back and strikes a devotional note. Yarhyabjana bhacharanai shanayoru bhaktya cheto malani vidhamed gunakarmajani tasmin vishuddha upalabhyata atmatattvam sakshat yathamala drusho savidra prakashaha. Why did I explain to you, my dear Nimi Chakravarti, all this? Referring to your own within, referring to the three inner states called Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti, wakefulness, dream and sleep. It is only to lead you to your own inside and get hold of this wonderful godly experience. Yarhyabjana bhacharanai shanayoru bhaktya cheto malani vidhamed gunakarmajani tasmin vishuddha upalabhyata atmatattvam. This Atma Tattva, Atma, yes, it is a Tattva. It is not just an existence. It is a Tattva. I don't know how to translate this word Tattva in English. Normally the word Tattva is translated as it is a principle. Truly speaking, you have to say it is a subject of cognition. It is a subject of realization. Not even perception. When you say perception or insight, the perception belongs to the senses, the insight belongs to the intelligence. But here, it is something like a cognition or an awareness or a realization. Now, this realization can take place only in that realizing sphere that is beyond the body of matter and energy, get into the mind, get into the intelligence, get into the ego, and dissolve all the three, reach where from thoughts emerge, where thoughts abide, and where thoughts subside. That is the one wonderful source. Now, in order to enable you in that, what should be done? Yarhi abjanapha charanai shanayohuru bhaktya. You must have supreme and overwhelming devotion to the Lord, infallible Lord. Charanai shanayohuru bhaktya. Have supreme and unflinching devotion to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Paramakalyananidhi, Lord Hari. By virtue of this devotion, Cheto malani vidhamed gunakarmajani. Everyone's mind is a product of the world. Just like our body is evolved in the world by a bodily biological process, our mind also is evolved by a psychic process. What is this mind? The mind starts developing and growing in us when all the senses begin to interact with the objects. When the senses begin to interact with the objects, their impressions are formed in the mind, in the consciousness. These impressions are what the mind remembers and has as its stock. Now, every time after birth, we are looking at the world. Either we touch the mother or the mother touches the child. Gradually the sound is heard. As I always say, it takes some days, some time for the child to open its eyes and see. Initially the children, have you observed, they will never close their eyelids at all. Go on, they will go on seeing without closing the eyelids. That sensibility is not there. So after repeatedly interacting with the objects, object impressions are formed. And these impressions are being of objects. They always bring about a certain impurity. What is this impurity? Ignorance, delusion. Ignorance and delusion. What is delusion? Not being able to understand objects as pure impressions in the mind. I see a scale. Actually, the perception takes place in my mind. And in the mind, it is just like a picture of the mind drawn by the mind in itself. So the scale is mental. But I feel it is gross and solid. Why it is gross and solid? I can touch it. Touch is another sensory organ's result. As eyes are seeing colors, hand touches and feels. What is the difference between the two? There is no difference at all. One is sight, another is touch. In the case of the touch, the skin is in the hand, it has to go and feel. That does not change the character, the sensory character of the object. So let us be very, very clear. The delusion is that we are not able to understand right from the beginning that all the impressions formed in the mind, formed in the consciousness, they are consciousness alone. That feeling is not there. Naturally, a number of desires crop up. A number of ill feelings crop up. Maybe attractions and repulsions, fear, apprehension, jealousy, and so many other things. These are Chetomalani. Now, in order to remove this impurity of the mind in the form of ignorance, delusion, and worldliness, the only way is consider Lord Hari to be supreme in your life and be devoted to Him unflinchingly. Be devoted to Him unflinchingly. Never think of anything else. Think of the Lord. Remember Him. Be fond of Him. Learn to lean upon Him. Rest upon Him. Want to sit on His lap. Install Him in your heart. Ask Him to protect you, preserve you, bestow upon you all the best blessings in the world. You must have a multiple approach towards the Lord. The result should be unswerving devotion to Him. Uru Bhaktya. The bhakti cannot be a narrow one, a short-term one. It cannot be like a point, a spark, nothing like that. It has to be very wholesome, broad, wholesome, magnificent, very deep, consistent. When you have that kind of a devotion, Chedomalani vidhamed guna karmajani. What are the gunas? Sattva, Rajas and Tamas belonging to Prakriti. All the activities and interactions that take place in any individual, they are the result and outcome of Prakriti's gunas, nothing else. Gunas are operating in the mind level inside, and karmas are their external manifestations. Now all these are in the form of impurity because they never allow you to think about the subject, to think about the self, to think about the consciousness. The moment impressions of the world are formed by consciousness, our whole attention and involvement become inside the world. Arey, who makes these impressions? Where are they made? What is that master and maker of all these impressions? Such an inquiry, such a question, such a probe never occurs to anybody. That is why it is called impurity. As it is impure now, you will find there comes a time when our mind becomes very pure, holy, pious and serene. Then you will find the subject self will start shining and radiating in it. Now it is not possible because these impressions act like a curtain. We are after the impressions, after the world. Worldliness alone is in the mind. This has to be replaced by godliness. By what manner? By the power and process of devotion to the Supreme Lord. So, guna karmajani chetomalani vidhamed. When the impurities of the mind caused by the guna and karma of Prakriti are completely redressed, washed off, tasmin vishuddha upalabhyata atma tattvam. In that very same mind, tasmin vishuddha. When tasmin vishuddhe, when it is pure, when the same mind, the same consciousness, it starts becoming pure, atma tattvam upalabhyate. That which you refer to as the I, the Atma, that Atma Tattva will become a matter of direct experience, feeling and actualization for you. Just see. So where should be your focus, my dear viewers? Are you listening to me? The focus should be on your mind to make it pure. Understand the potential of your mind and consciousness. Know that the whole world is nothing but a picture drawn by your mind and consciousness in the consciousness. No second factor is involved there at all. Sakshat yatha amaladrisho savidra prakashaha. The sun is rising. The moment the sun rises, one half of the whole earth is lit. Because earth is round, only one half can be lit by the rising sun. And that Savitra Prakasha, the Prakasha, the brilliance of Savita, the sun, Sakshat Yathamala Drishoho. When your eyes are defect free, they are all right, you see the whole of the sun's brilliance. Exactly in the same manner, when the mind becomes pure, you will be able to perceive in full glory and splendor the Prakasha of the Atma. There is no difficulty at all. I would like to take away this impression from all of you. To perceive the self is hard. It may be rare, but you cannot argue before me to say that it is hard. It is a question of the mind acting as a curtain before the self because of the impurity. When the impurity is removed, how can it be removed? Yarhyabjana bhajarana ishanayoru bhaktya cheto malani vidhamet gunakarmajani. The whole of your devotion is meant to completely take away this impurity. If you have spent 10 minutes in your devotional exercise, I would like to stress the 10 minutes were meant to make your mind pure, removing its impurities. Apparently you think that I have done 10 minutes of devotion and I have gone 10 minutes nearer to God. It is not that. The purpose of devotion is to purify your mind. And after the devotion, you look into your mind. Is the mind purified? What is the nature of the talk that you make? Do you hurt people? Do you have desires and greed? Are you possessive? Do you have jealousy, hatred? See, you try to examine your mind, whether the mind is pure or not. From the words that come out of the mouth, from the actions that come out of your body, from the arguments and reason that emanate from your intelligence. In all these things you will find whether they are pure or impure. So it should be very clear. The purpose of devotion is to purify the mind, and a pure mind instantly becomes self-luminous. What did I say? A pure mind instantly becomes self-luminous. It becomes like the sun or the full moon. Yarhyabjana bhajaranai shanayoru bhaktya cheto malani vidhamed guna karmajani tasmin vishuddha upalabhyata atma tattvam sakshat yathamala drusho savidra prakasha. This is verse number 40 in the 3rd chapter. Now I would like to explain this particular verse with reference to a number of other, at least 1 or 2 other shlokas, so that the idea will remain sufficiently strong in your mind. In the same skandha, 11th skandha, Krishna, while speaking to Uddhava, he says, Yatha yatha atma parimrjyate sau mat punyagatha shravanabhidhanaihi tatha tatha pashyati vastu sukshmam chakshur yathaiva anjana samprayuktam yatha yatha atma parimrjyate sau. Asau atma yatha yatha parimrjyate. Whenever we refer to the atma, we can never refer to that self. Whenever people refer to God, they will say God. There is one somewhere. This is what they say. Whenever you refer to the self, we very clearly know we are referring to something in the form of this. Asau atma yatha yatha parimrjyate. As much as it is getting purified. By what? Mat punyagatha shravanabhidhanaihi. Mad punyagatha shravanabhidhanaihi. The entire Sreemad Bhagavatam is a narration. Here, Shugamuni is narrating it to Parikshit. Sudha is narrating it to the others. So it is in the form of a narration. And in the whole narration, what do you describe it as? It is narrating God, His excellences and exploits. What is meant by God? What is the role God plays? What is the connection the world has with Him? Does He take full responsibility for maintaining and preserving this world? When there are upheavals, when there are troublesome situations. See, in the previous days, kings used to be rulers. And the king always had the supreme authority. There was nobody to question him. He can behead anybody anytime when he is convinced that is called for, beheading is called for. Now, particularly we are discussing about Krishna etc. in Sreemad Bhaagavatam. Why was Krishna's birth necessary? Because his own uncle Kamsa proved himself to be a despot. He put his own father into the prison and started ruling. Many people left Mathura during his time, unable to live here. So such a wicked and tyrannical rule was imposed. And what could people do? Because king was supreme. Naturally, the king had to be challenged, had to be vanquished in a very special and effective manner. Krishna's birth was for that. Why am I saying this? Mat punyagatha shravanabhidanaihi. In Srimad Bhagavatam or similar texts you will find always the exploits, the excellences of the Supreme Lord. How does he contend various difficult situations? Does he take recourse to some special expediencies? If so, what is it like? Now in Krishna's life you will find many of the acts are superhuman. Ordinary people will never be able to do it. He was about 7 or 8 years old. He was called by Kamsa for a Dhanuryaga. The invitation was, though for a Dhanuryaga, seeing that, to be present there. Kamsa made all arrangements to contend Krishna and liquidate him in the process. The first hurdle was a Kuvalaya Pida elephant. Thereafter, he was led to the wrestling arena. Can you imagine? A 7-year-old boy. He is called upon to contend Malla and Chanura. Very huge figures, wrestlers, famous wrestlers. And what happened? Krishna subdued both of them and straightaway jumped over to where Kamsa was seated, and he killed Kamsa also, his own uncle. These are not ordinary developments in human life. They are very rare and extremely wonder-striking episodes in human life. And like that you will find so many features. Why it was necessary? Only to liquidate Kamsa, who was giving a despotic rule. So, God, the religious God who is responsible for the maintenance and preservation of the world, will have to take recourse to many expediencies because the human mind is very notorious. It can become wicked and cruel to any extent that is thinkable and even unthinkable. When the humanity starts suffering from such a scorching rule, except a divine manifestation, nothing can be of help. You will find our ruling government clearly admits that corruption cannot be rooted out by a magic stick. It will take a long time. The situation is very complex. The issue is more complex. So we are not able to live in a country free of corruption. The ration card holder, the one who receives a mail from a postman, whenever he goes to panchayat, whenever he goes to village office, district office, block development, anywhere and everywhere, it's only corruption, corruption and corruption. Now what to do? We are bound to agree to this corruption. It is up to the authorities concerned to do away with corruption, but they are not able to do. Even if they want to, the will is there. The corruption is taking place through a hierarchy of people. So all the people will have to change in their mentality. How to bring about the necessary change? It becomes a very complex question. Now such complex questions, when they arise and become very acute, there is a godly manifestation. Now Krishna's birth was one such. It was to relieve the earth of quite a number of excess population caused by wicked people. Quite a number of people, crores of people he destroyed. Now, mat punyagatha shravana bhidhanai. Listening to all these exploits and excellences of God, who comes to rescue the world, to ensure a smooth survival of all good and noble people, they are worth hearing. After all, we are interested. This world is something we interact with our senses. So, to counter these world interactions, they are giving you a very good, beautiful narration of godly things, super divine instances and episodes. Listen to all of them. After the devotional fondness towards God sufficiently grips your mind, you feel like chanting the name of God yourself.